Hello again, everybody. This is Craig Evans of Autism Hangout, and thank you for tuning into this episode of the Ask Dr. Tony Show, where Dr. Tony Attwood answers your questions about Asperger's and autism. Hello, Dr. T.
Hello, Craig. Good to see you again, and it's time for a chat. I am ready.
Okay, here we go. First question. This is about living with autism. Are there any cross-cultural studies about Asperger's and a society or a culture's approach that proves individuals with Asperger's can be more successful?
That's a difficult one to answer, really, because autism occurs in all cultures. And from my clinical experience, that has ranged from people of European origin to those of Aboriginal origin that live virtually in the desert in Australia. So it's a part of humans. But the question is, how does a culture, and particularly religious groups, view someone who is different, and hopefully having a positive perception of someone who is different? Now, in some cultures, there can be having a diagnosis of autism will have an effect on the status of the family within their culture, of shame and suitability of family members for marrying, that they might be contaminated in some way. So there can be a way of hiding disability. Another one, which is almost sort of a religious view of guilt and punishment, especially punishment for sins. There are some religions that will say that your disabled child is God's punishment for sinning, which is not a good way of loving your child.
Yeah.
Also, that it can be God's will. God has given you this to test you. So in other words, you can't complain, you can't seek services. And so there can be issues of really seeing the person as being disobedient and disrespectful, and the approach is one of punishment, a horrendous punishment, not guidance and tolerance. So those are some of the things that we need to explore in the cultural background of the individual. The person is the same in terms of autism, but it's how that culture or religion perceive that person. Now, in a way, one of the things that seems to occur is autism is viewed as women's business, and women will do it, and that's their job. And unfortunately, the majority of politicians are males. And as far as they're concerned, macho, sport, and military are what we're interested in and we're going to give money to, not what women do, and they can do it and we don't have to pay them. But I'm going to change this in a way and also say, if we're looking at different cultures, perhaps the best culture is those who have autism. And it is a culture. And I would say seek membership and allegiance with like-minded individuals in terms of friendship, support, and to be a wise elder, which is what we talk about in our book, Been There, Done That, Try This, is giving advice to other people. Now, there is a book actually on this, which is here, published by Jessica Kingsley Publishers, Autism, Ethnicity and Culture, Working with Children and Families from Minority Communities. So that's what I would recommend if the author of this question wants further information.
Wonderful response. Let's talk about faking it. Dr. Tony, I was recently diagnosed with ASD at the age of 27. I'm also gay, and coming out was very traumatic. Growing up, I found comfort in the church. I became the lead volunteer youth leader. But after years of wearing a mask, I came out to the youth pastor as gay. I was 21. He forced me to step down from leadership and to lie to the youth about why. After some time, I came out to my parents, and the same week I came out to the youth in front of a new youth minister. The minister of the church then asked to meet him in his office, where he asked me what my agenda was, like I was trying to do something inappropriate. I thought what I was doing was obvious. I wanted them to hear about it from me and not someone else. My question is, how do you begin to take off the mask after previous trauma in doing so?
Tricky one, because there's two masks here. There's the mask of being gay. And some individuals and religious groups see that as something that is unacceptable. And unfortunately, they do not accept your sexuality. But I'm going to focus on the other mask, which is autism, having exposed yourself before and the trauma of what's occurred. First of all, in disclosing, I think is both brave and wise. Incredibly brave considering your previous experiences, but wise in a number of ways. Because wearing the mask of faking neurotypical, as Maya Tode says, for every day you should be awarded an Oscar for acting neurotypical. It's a cause of exhaustion, stress, and depression. Now, the question is for this person, who to tell? It needs to be someone you trust and someone you would like to see the real you. Okay? Now, what do you want them to know? And what you may do is start by explaining the challenges you faced throughout your life, friendship, sensory experiences, anxiety, and so on, and how you coped. And a way of coping is to create a mask, to observe, analyze, and imitate. But it's creating a false identity to cope. Also, to explain in autism the qualities in friendship, employment, as well as the challenges socially and sensory that cause anxiety and stress, and how the person you've disclosed to can help you. It's giving them trust and a gift. And in a way, it's how you can help me. Now, the previous trauma may inhibit taking off the mask, but be brave and selective in who you disclose to.
Very good. Another question about masking, but this time it's in relation to keeping your friends. I'm a woman who's recently been diagnosed with ASD in my 20s, but I'm still having issues with friendship. This person has been my friend for years, and I thought our friendship was unconditional. I assumed it would be safe to take off my mask around her when I learned I was on the spectrum. However, it massively backfired. She was criticizing me continuously, which she hadn't done before, and she stopped replying to my messages almost overnight. She's also unfollowed me on social media. How can I prevent this from happening with the other few friendships that I have?
It does appear that she had a perception of you with the mask, and she doesn't know how to relate to you without the mask. It's like you've become a different person, and she is finding that paradigm shift difficult to cope with, and she needs time to sort that out. I'd also be concerned about her perception of autism, because if she's then gone into the official textbooks, it's viewed as a mental disorder, a sense of madness and psychosis, which may be dangerous and so on, or may have got information from the media, which is not accurate, but can be quite concerning. So I wonder if that person may one day come back once they've accepted the paradigm shift, that it's still you and that you aren't somebody totally different. Now, there are other friends, and the question is, do I tell it, the information to others? First of all, again, prepare what you would like them to know. To talk about the autism qualities in friendship, things like being very kind, honest, reliable, and as a female, don't play bitchy games of in-group, out-group, and so on. In fact, if you want the most reliable, honest, trustworthy friend, it's someone with autism.
Right.
I don't see any point in that meanness. Now, what I would ask you to do is explain how they can help you. For example, if they're with you in a one-on-one or a social group, to reinforce what went well. When you read the signals, when you responded appropriately, then they can tell you you did a good job, because otherwise you're trying to progress in social relatedness without much positive feedback. A lot of criticism and rejection, but not positive. So you need to know what went well. But also guidance in what you need to know. If you made a social faux pas, didn't read the facial expressions, etc. or you need to read the cues, that they can guide you and support you in that. So it's seeking their help, which in friendship is a good thing to do. But they may also, in a social occasion of a gathering, script you before the social gathering of the things to be aware of, things to talk about. You could talk to Mary about her Caribbean cruise. You can talk to Jeff about his trip to Europe, and a debrief after the social occasion to let you know how you did. So that's what I would suggest in masking and also keeping friends.
Dr. Tony, I've heard you say in the past that sometimes the biggest social impediments for people on the spectrum are NTs. And it sounds like what's going on here is this woman's friend is just fearful and she doesn't know how to respond, so she just cut her off.
Yeah.
Dr. Tony, I have an incapacitating fear of mistakes. It's so strong that the only thing to do in order not to feel it is to do nothing. And it's tightly entangled with my self-identity of being wrong, a freak, a failure. What can help?
First of all, making a mistake is like 110-volt electric shock. It hurts. It's not uncomfortable. It is incredibly painful. It's like an electric shock. Now, in autism, there's a mind that seeks patterns, but also errors, and spots errors very quickly, which is great in a job for quality control. But what you can get is performance anxiety. That is being allergic to errors, almost a phobia for errors, but also a fear of appearing stupid and having ridicule from peers in a variety of ways. You see, for example, when you're at school, if you're not good socially and you're not good at sport, then intelligence is incredibly important as a sense of identity and self-worth. It's what you've got. So making a mistake proves you're stupid, and that really hurts your self-esteem. But there's another dimension, and that clinically I'm concerned about. It's self-imposed expectations. With a person with autism having higher expectations of their own performance, more than parents, more than any teacher, it's, I should be better than this. And there's almost like an inner critic that stays with them if not careful for life. Now, there are certain what we call cognitive issues. When things go wrong and you make a mistake, not easily identifying a plan B, whereas others would very, so we say, slowly. I use if my elbow to my wristwatch for the measure of agitation. Typical person, it won't work. Okay, this is agitation. I'll try another way. I'll try another way. I keep going. I'll stay calm. Reaches that point, solved it. The problem with autism is, I can't do it. And they go straight there. And there's an intense emotional reaction. And then somebody says, well, we'll try again. The person with autism said, are you mad, woman? That nearly killed me. So they may not have an ability to find out what else to do. It's leading to frustration and agitation. But it's also a difficulty being calm. Neurotypicals seem to self-talk, self-soothe, and be calm, whereas those with autism have a very quick emotional reaction, and that increasing anxiety, performance anxiety, increases cognitive rigidity and decreases access to memory of what to do. Now, approach. Please, it's a way of switching how you think about an error. It's classic cognitive behavior therapy. An error gives you information. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean to say that people are automatically going to laugh at you. You've got information which is useful in finding the solution. Also, being calm is being smart. One of the things I say for those who understand is, look, when you get upset, your IQ drops 30 points. Yes, it drops into the normal range. So being calm is being smart, and you get physical abilities and strength from exercise, and you get intellectual strength from mental exercise. Otherwise, you'll be a flabby couch potato. So when that panic occurs that I can't do it, first of all, focus on the feelings. Take a deep breath, count to 10, reduce the heart rate, and try another way, ask for help. But that's what I would suggest for that question.
Wonderful suggestion. It's been shown people on the autism spectrum, specifically with Asperger's, do have a higher IQ than those in the general population.
Yes.
So, hello, I'm having trouble finding any information or expertise on what may be best described as perfectionism. People keep saying I'm too hard on myself and I'm being a perfectionist when I work to exceed the standards. But I really don't understand those two phrases. I don't want punishment or negative outcomes, so why would I perform at subpar levels? I want the rewards of performing well, and if I can, then why shouldn't I? More to the point, how am I expected to perform below expectations? Do I leave a percentage of the task undone? Do I intentionally break things? I already reduced my vocabulary and conversation topics for their comfort. I had to go to the emergency room yesterday because of anxiety, which I believe is because I'm unable to solve this contradiction of expectations. Will you please explain perfectionism from an Aspies standpoint in a way that I can understand?
Those with autism and Asperger's are craftsmen. They're interested in quality, not quantity, and a great attention to detail, and have many qualities that were often better perceived and valued in days gone by. But it really relates to a question I ask in the diagnostic assessment of an adult with autism and Asperger's syndrome. It's a very easy question to say, but to answer is difficult and illuminating. Who are you? And for many with autism, you can see them be stunned and have great difficulty in defining who they are. If we go deeper, neurotypicals describe the self through their social network and personality adjectives. But for those with autism, define the self by what I do and what I know. I am what I do. So perfectionism is a means of self-esteem and self-identity. So that's why it's much more important to you, because this defines who I am, not my social network, not my personality that I'm generous or whatever it is. I am what I do. Mm-hmm. And so, sorry, in the background, this is live recording. Thanks, Dawn. Cup of tea. I need a cup of tea. It's a sense of perfectionism as a means of self-identity. So it really goes to the heart of who you are. Okay? I think we'll keep that and keep it as realistic.
Okay. I think we'll keep it too. Hi, I'm a high school student from Turkey, and recently I've been diagnosed with both OCD and ADHD. I've been using antidepressants under control of a psychiatrist as treatment method, but since my symptoms started to fade away, my psychiatrist decided for me to stop taking my prescriptions, and I have done that. However, I am curious if OCD and ADHD has any connections with Asperger's, or if I'm just confused with anxiety syndromes.
Good question. Statistically, about 85% of those with autism have daily problems with anxiety. We found that in our book, Been There, Done That, Try This. One of the biggest challenges in life for those with autism as adults, anxiety. Now, around about 75% also have signs of ADHD. So the two can go together. Now, when we look at the anxiety part, the reasons are neurology, part of the brain called the amygdala, which seems to be heightened reactivity, but also you've had a lot of aversive experiences socially and sensory, and a difficulty cognitively by self-talk, affection, disclosure, a range of strategies neurotypical you will use to manage your emotions. Sometimes in autism, there are a limited range of mechanisms for reducing your anxiety. Now, ADHD is to do with what we call executive functioning. That's planning, organizing, priorities, time management, attention span, and flexible thinking. Now, both anxiety and ADHD are looked at as functions of the amygdala and the frontal lobes, because the frontal lobes manage emotions, put a brake, keep calm, and executive functioning in the ADHD. Now, it seems with the medications for anxiety, usually an SSRI, and ADHD, which are usually stimulants, I find with this person's description intriguing, because it may well be that during the latter part of puberty, the frontal lobes are reconfigured for all of us. There's a lovely phrase that I heard: during puberty, the frontal lobes are closed for renovation. A lovely way of looking at it. So it may well be that the maturation of the frontal lobes in executive functioning and the ability to manage emotions has improved, that the person no longer needs medication. That's good.
Excellent. Now we're going to talk about jobs and working jobs. This one is titled Burnout. Dear Dr. Tony, first of all, thanks to you and Craig for doing this. It's a great resource. I live in rural Western Canada, and I've been diagnosed with ASD at age 51. I've spent most of my life masking, successfully enough that my family have been unaware of my autism, but it is a continual strain. As an adult, I've had several burnouts where I fail out of school or lose a job because I just can't do it anymore, and it affects my work performance. I then retreat from the world, and I spend months of exhaustion and sometimes depression before I can pick myself up and try again. Now, along with some lifetime health issues, I've recently developed fibromyalgia with post-exertional malaise. I've moved back to my hometown and have 2 part-time jobs that I enjoy, one self-employed, but I feel another burnout is coming on. I don't want to lose what I have. I've found advice on finding jobs and keeping jobs, including your book, Been There, Done That, Try This. But so far, I've not found anything on actual burnout. Is job burnout or other types of burnout a part of ASD? And are there any strategies that I can use to prevent it?
Good news is, yes, yes, yes. It is associated with autism. Now, unfortunately, the person with autism has to consume a huge amount of mental energy in coping with life. And Maya Tode from Denmark, she has Asperger's herself. She's now studying psychology. And she was aware that she had what may be termed cyclical depression. Began when she was 7 or 8 years old. And throughout her life, especially in her late teens, she would find herself exhausted from coping with life. And one of the causes of depression is energy depletion. Others can be genetics. It can also be a response to bullying and teasing. And there are many reasons that depression can occur. But one in autism is energy depletion. Now, she developed a concept, it's brilliant, called energy accounting. I really like it. It's great. And it's and this person may benefit from, Exploring Depression and Beating the Blues by me and my friend and colleague, Michelle Garnett. It's a self-help manual for adults and teenagers with Asperger's and autism in how to understand and manage their depression. Now, what we do in a simple term is, as a bank account, we look at withdrawals and deposits. So throughout the day, you will have circumstances and thoughts that drain you of energy, but also circumstances and thoughts that infuse you with energy. And what we do is we look at a list, and this is an example here, of the sorts of things that may drain you of energy or deposit. And I'll go through this. Okay, for someone with autism, what could be draining? Socializing. I do it, but it's exhausting. Social migraine the next day. Change. Making a mistake. Sensory sensitivity. Daily living skills. huge amount of energy consumed managing your anxiety, overanalyzing your social performance, sensitivity to other people's moods and being infected by them, being teased or excluded, crowds, government agencies, body shape, perceived injustice, and certain people that I call in psychological astronomy black holes that suck out your energy. Right. So we go through what are the things that drain you of energy. And in the work setting, it can be change in expectations, it can be team meetings, it can be all sorts of things. What are your deposits? Solitude, yeah, but it takes time, and in a job, how can you be alone? The special interest really is an amazing way of infusing the person with energy. Physical activity, animals and nature, computer games, meditation, caring for others. From our been there, done that, try that book. Nutrition is important. Sleep, reading your favorite books, such as Harry Potter, having information on the internet, being with pets, and certain people energize you. So we find out what they are, and we have a currency, 0 to 100. So in your daily energy accounting chart, you have a list of withdrawals, 0 to 100. How bad was socializing today? 80. Coping with change, 40. Sensory sensitivity, 90. Sensitivity to other people's moods, 60. So you have a numerical value for each day. But what are your deposits? Solitude, no chance for that today. Special interest, yes, I had an hour on that. That was 60. Animals and nature, that was 90. Nutrition, only 20, etc. Now, we then compare the two. And if there are more withdrawals than deposits, your energy depletion means that you will eventually go down and tip into a depression. And that's what this person is discovering. That over time, they can keep up their energy levels, but they reach a tipping point and it goes. So what I would strongly suggest that person does is keep, not necessarily daily, but at least weekly, what are the energy withdrawals they've had in that 0 to 100 for each one. And then what they must do is, if they've gone below the line, in their diary for next week, they must put in more deposit activities. Otherwise, you're going to get depression. So that's the rule. Once you found you're sinking, you must find more energy-infusing activities. Otherwise, you've now got depression for a number of months at least.
What a brilliant management strategy. Next question. I have found most of the advice relating to Aspies working is related to getting a job and keeping it. However, I find my biggest challenge is managing the demands of a full-time job while coping with everyday tasks such as cleaning and cooking. I find it exhausting, and I can't manage to do everything on a weekly basis. My question is, how can I manage a full-time job while doing all the housework and finding time to engage with my interests?
This one is really related to the previous one.
Yes.
And it's a balance in your life. And you've got to look at that what is essential. It's a question of priorities. And there are certain household activities, from cooking, cleaning, and budgeting and so on. For the person with autism, those can be a bit of a challenge in terms of priority and working out and planning for the future. Whereas neurotypicals seem to be able to do that without effort. The person with autism often needs prompts, encouragement, and may have a certain sense of self-doubt in those areas. Now, after you've done that, you're then supposed to have time for a job. And that may mean that the best job is a part-time job that doesn't drain you too much in terms of energy, in terms of the socializing or the changing job expectations and so on. So it's creating balance in your life, really.
Next, we're going to talk several topics here: autism, PTSD, and Polyvagal Theory. Let's start with this. I'd like to ask Dr. Attwood what consideration he has put into the misdiagnosis of women and girls as autistic when they may in fact have complex PTSD. Is there an academic writing available on this? And is there a route to follow to rescind a misdiagnosis of autism where the diagnosis negatively affects that person's life?
Interesting. There's autism and there's PTSD. They are not mutually exclusive. But PTSD can have many characteristics similar to autism. Autism is defined by a range of behaviors, and the pathway to those behaviors can be different. But one thing we do know is that those with autism are very vulnerable to post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, there was a recent study in 2018 in the journal Psychological Trauma, and ASD may serve as a vulnerability marker for PTSD. In other words, they have more traumas, but less understanding of why they would occur, especially if it involves someone whose motives they cannot understand. And because with theory of mind, I can't understand why you did that, they have a tendency not to understand why, difficulty explaining their thoughts and feelings and so on, and so often ruminate on injustice, traumas, etc., for decades after the event. Now, they are more prone to traumatic events from bullying and teasing, abuse that can occur at all levels, sensory sensitivity. What matters is the person's perception and coping mechanisms, and those with autism have major risk and vulnerability for PTSD. But we find that when you have PTSD, it increases autism. It doesn't create it, but can increase it. Now, we seem to think that there are shared underlying mechanisms for PTSD and ASD, such as ruminations, cognitive rigidity, avoidance, aggression, and so on. And sometimes at any moment, it's hard. Is this PTSD? Is this autism? And you need a very experienced clinician to disentangle between the two. For this person, it seems that they may think that PTSD is the primary concern. And I quite understand a clinician's confusion between the two. I can't comment on this case because I don't know the person. However, there is a suggestion that the use of EMDR may well help treat those with autism who have experienced trauma. A new research study that came out last year in the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders looked at EMDR, eye movement therapy, and half the sample reported having been bullied with disturbing memories of the trauma of being bullied and teased, and there was a significant reduction of symptoms of post-traumatic stress and psychological distress, etc. Now, there's also another component, and that is in the UK, they've developed what's called the Coventry Grid. And the Coventry Grid is to look at the differences between autism and attachment problems that can be related to early trauma. And what it does is it goes through page after page of comparing the symptoms of ASD and presentation in attachment problems and so on. So clinicians can use the Coventry Grid as a structure, series of questions and analysis to try and find out if there's a qualitative difference that confirms PTSD or ASD, but quite often it's both.
This is also related to that question. Hi, Dr. Tony. I'd like to ask your opinion about the correlation between trauma and complex PTSD and ASD. Are children with ASD more vulnerable to childhood emotional neglect? And do they have a higher probability for developing complex PTSD than NTs? Do people on the spectrum develop complex PTSD as a consequence of social exclusion and bullying?
Yeah, very much so. Because often for the person with autism, they say, why me? I'm a nice guy. I'm kind. Why would they enjoy that? And they become totally fixated on the motives of people and ruminating on why they would do that. but how do I respond? And nobody came to protect me. And this is wrong. And often they got away with it. And when I retaliated, I got into trouble, not the people who have been doing that. That sense of injustice is very offensive to those with autism. So again, my concern is not autism, it's neurotypicals and what they may do to traumatize the person with autism. Now, that can include bullying and teasing, but it can also include abuse in all its forms: emotional, verbal, financial, and sexual abuse. They are a group that predators spot as naive, gullible, and vulnerable. And it's almost like they are a magnet to the worst kind of neurotypical. So what we may need to do is help that person. How do you spot someone who's not nice and not friendly? How do you tell? Is there anyone you can talk to who can meet this person to check them out or talk about what's happening? Because the person with autism is not seeing the signals of what's going on. And this is all I'm worth, this is all I'll ever get, and so on. And no, you don't deserve this. And often the view is, but I'm despicable, this is the best I could expect. So it's looking at building self-esteem and resilience. In my clinical work, especially with the teenagers, it's building resilience, and a positive sense of self is what's needed.
Dear Dr. Tony, I'd really like to hear your opinion on the Polyvagal Theory. And are there therapies for emotion regulation and recognition that you could recommend?
Wow. Polyvagal theory is relatively new to me. And when I listen to people explaining it, I go, wow, it's fascinating. It's to do with the vagal nerve. And it seems to explain a lot of autistic characteristics. Now, I'm still learning, so I don't want to explain what it is, etc., because I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable to have confidence that I'm going to explain it accurately. What I will do is, where do you go? Holly Bridges, I've met Holly, she is amazing. And she's written a book, Reframe Your Thinking Around Autism, How the Polyvagal Theory and Brain Plasticity Help Us Make Sense of Autism. And so one or two of my colleagues are taking this further with a variety of strategies that help. So I think if you look on Wikipedia, find out about it, have a look at Holly Bridges' webpage and information, and explore further. So I strongly suspect that in the next few years, this will be a term known by those who work in the area of autism, because it explains many aspects of sensory sensitivity, interoception, emotion management, and so on. Now, the last part of the question is aspects of emotion regulation. Yes. All I can say is I've written a lot on that, on video as well. So just look up in, dare I say it, Amazon and other things, or Jessica Kingsley publishers.
I'm sure over the course of the next few months and years, we're going to learn more about polyvagal theory, so I'm sure it'll be something we'll talk about again in the future. Intimacy, dating, sex, and marriage. Dr. Tony, can you talk about Aspies and infidelity? My Aspie ex-husband cheated all the time, and he had no remorse. He felt like it was okay for him, and he didn't care how I felt when I found out. He obsessed with pornography and women, no shame or guilt whatsoever. Is this a common trait in Aspies? He also has strong narcissist behavior with his AS, and he completely abandoned our 15-year marriage when he was caught. Any insight is very much appreciated.
This is not unique. Unfortunately, I have known where a partner, usually a man with autism, has had infidelity and has no remorse for what they've done. They've often not really understood and appreciated their partner's perspective and feelings in that situation. Also, I found that usually when young, the person with autism is famous or notorious for being honest. So at school, when the teacher said, "Who did that?" the kid with autism says, "He did," or "I did," and don't seem to realize that you can lie and get away with it. And then the person learns you can lie and you can get away with it. And in autism, there can be what I call emotional dyskinesia. That is, you don't easily express your emotions in facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. So you're not giving away any cues that you're actually lying. It's what I call a poker face. Great when you're playing poker, but not in a relationship. And so the person may not be uncomfortable lying, and it may be easy to do as a quick fix for the situation. Now, I am concerned about the pornography obsession, which may have become an addiction in a way, in a sense of pleasure and enjoyment. And it's become a special interest. And the person is exploring all sexual experiences. And that can be of concern as to where they go on the internet, what do they actually access, and also expecting their partner to engage in activities that they've seen in pornography, which may not be what their partner wants to do. Now, in abandoning the marriage, often in autism, there can be very black and white. That's it. When it's over, it's over. It's past its use-by date. It's very black and white thinking. That's it. It's had its usefulness. It's now gone. I'm moving on, which is devastating for the neurotypical partner. But there's also in the description in the question, the narcissistic approach, which is very much my way. What's in it for me? It's being very self-centered. And that can occur in autism. It is being very self-centered, and this person may be thinking of themselves rather than others, which is very much a contradiction of the vast majority of people with autism who are famous for being kind and caring. Some of those caring people I know have autism, but in autism there are always exceptions, and this person may be an exception.
Dr. Tony, we have one last category, and it's from Aging Aspies. It would be most helpful if you could spend part or one of your sessions on people who are in their 60s and are on the autism spectrum. There's been little research done in this age group. My husband was diagnosed 10 years ago after having a mental health breakdown, and it's difficult to know whether his deteriorating cognitive ability is due to getting older, or as an autistic person, or as possibly it's a form of dementia. I'm sure I'm not alone in this situation. I have a number of books on Asperger's, including yours, but they don't cover the problems associated with older people on the spectrum. So Dr. T, what characteristics come to the surface as an Aspie ages?
Okay, two things here. As you age, one of the first areas to go for everyone is the frontal lobes. And the frontal lobes are involved with thinking, planning, memory to a certain extent, and emotion regulation. And those with autism need efficient frontal lobes to cognitively process social situations, manage their emotions, and so on. They're very frontal lobe orientated. So there can be an issue in aging as the frontal lobes decrease in efficiency naturally, that some of the autistic features could become more conspicuous. Fortunately, in a relationship, she may well be able to prompt her husband in what to do. So she becomes his frontal lobe of organizing, planning, helping him to manage his emotions. But it's a natural part of aging. But like the author of the question, what is aging? And research is starting to occur. I'm supervising a PhD student, Bertina, and she has interviewed 10 mature adults. I like the word mature, in their 60s. That's me. I'm mature. Mean age 63. Very intensive interviews, and she analyzed 4 overlapping themes in aging. 1, the Aspie identity. Secondly, emotion regulation. 3rd, social instinct. And 4, positive outlook. Now, the first aspect, in a way, to look at is in aging and emotion regulation. And when she interviewed them and the issues of anxiety and depression, they said that the recovery from depression was slow and lengthy. Don't forget, this was before we really understood what is involved, and had experienced mental health problems since their teenage years, but not understanding what they were going through. Now, 7 out of the 10 reported that as they had grown older, they had experienced an improvement in their mental health. 7 out of 10. Wow. Also, in life, they'd found a number of stresses at work, including working for a boss who has no ethics.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, in emotion regulation, being stressed and overwhelmed by issues of relationship difficulties, including perceived failure to meet the emotional needs of their neurotypical partner. And that was a source of depression. Or, I'm Aspie and I gave Aspie to my children. I wish I hadn't. There can be a distrust and disdain for most forms of treatment and health professions, especially medical doctors, physicians, because they really don't understand. They didn't listen or understand and felt unfairly judged and misrepresented by health professionals. As one person said, they weren't interested in me, they're interested in the drugs they can sell. And there was often an aversion to medication as a common theme because of vulnerability to side effects. Now, in emotion regulation, it was coming up with strategies themselves through reading and experimentation rather than advice from health professionals. In other words, I'll do it my way. They found very successful exercise and self-talk, such as, you can manage this, you'll be okay. Mindfulness, meditation, and spiritual and physical activities, such as gardening for emotion regulation, often enjoying solitary pursuits, and as one said, in aging, I can be a bit kinder to myself. We've talked today about being self-critical. There's a sense of stoicism, toughness, and lack of self-pity. Now, in terms of social, feeling drained by socializing, its effortful, it remained a lifelong problem, with awkward social interactions, fraught relationships, and a sense of solitariness. Now, over time, a realization these difficulties are going to be there for the whole of your life. However, 8 out of 10 noted a gradual improvement in social abilities. In other words, I got it. I've worked out a pattern. I know this is going to be a problem all my life, but I'm getting better. 2 out of 3 found it worse. 2 out of 10 worsened over time. Quote, I really long to belong, but not experiencing genuine friendship. They may have a partner, but genuine friendship. Now, other things we found in research is in social instinct, desire to connect with others intellectually. We just talked about that at the moment. And solitude, the only time when I can feel relaxed. Very sensitive to the mood or atmosphere around them, that empathic attunement that can occur and being more aware of that. Quote, I've always been sensitive to people's state of mind and mood. There's a strong desire to help others with autism, which is interesting as the wise elders of the tribe, the culture. Quote, I used to think I could make people like me if I tried hard enough. Therefore, if they didn't like me, it was my fault. Now, the final thing we found of successful outcome was a positive outlook, awareness of being different and acceptance of being different, a positive reframing and a degree of contentment in life, and importantly, a sense of humor. Quote, I can now look back and cut myself a bit of slack. It's being comfortable with who they are. Quote, I've become more accepting myself. New rewarding activities, volunteer work in the 60s when you may no longer be employed, community groups, work schedules that suit them without concern for negative judgment. No pressure to conform to society's standards, focus on activities that brought pleasure and a sense of fulfillment, and the benefits of a sense of humor. So a long answer to that question, but that is as yet to be published research, which I found very heartening.
Is that research going to be in a book soon, or where could people find it, and how soon will it be when it's out?
It is going to be published in a research article, and it's been submitted to the journal. It'll obviously have changes.
Sure.
So at this stage, we're awaiting publication.
Oh my gosh, that's just awesome. Somebody has done some research. So that's an answer to the person that has written in. I love it when things like this happen. Dr. Tony, that's all the questions that we have this round. However, we had a comment on YouTube I thought was worth mentioning. I love it when I hear back from you people. Thank you for writing when you find something of interest. But this happens to be about an Ask Dr. Tony that we filmed back in 2011. We were talking about intellectual orgasms, and it's interesting that that particular film has had about 50,000 views at this point in time. Here's a comment. That's right. Here's a comment from Franz 1987. He introduced a word that I'm sure you've heard of, but it was new to me. The term is sapiosexual, someone who is sexually and mentally turned on by smart people. Sapiosexuals are aroused by intelligence. And his comment is, this is why I like to identify myself as a sapiosexual.
It is. But again, as I said, I think earlier, if you're not good socially and you're not good at sport, one thing that you are good at is your intellect, and you value intelligence in yourself and other people. So often I find that when I talk to the teenagers, what sort of a partner would you like? Often in the, should we say, rank order, for those with autism, they rank intelligence very highly. They must at least match my intellectual abilities. So that's interesting.
If anybody has questions on getting a diagnosis or finding services, we don't have those databases. Again, I'd encourage you to find an autism association near you and take those questions to them because they're best suited to give you the answers you're after. Okay, Dr. Tony, that's it for this time. Thank you as always. I know that the people out there in viewing land appreciate your answers.
Thanks, Greg. I really enjoy these, and I'm looking forward to when they're posted on the internet.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. Good night.